We'll go ahead and get started here with what we've got going on and what we've got planned for today. And I'll go ahead and share my screen so that we're ready to roll here too. I think I've got somebody to admit. There we go. But I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll get ready to go here. Topic of today happens to be interference and obstruction. Let's see where my video stuff went. There it is. Everybody good with the video? Everybody can see like my screen, right? I think I hit it share.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
all right, cool. We're good to go then. All righty. Well, I'll go ahead and get rolling then here. Like I said, thank you for joining us here and take some time from your lunch break. My goal here, and we're on a time limit here anyway, because Dennison hasn't upgraded our account just yet. So, but at any rate, couple ground rules to go through here as we get ready to go through some of the clips. Basically, the whole theme of 3 up, 3 down is for us to try and come up with 3 clips, talk through those 3 clips. Sometimes they'll have a theme like we do today, and that is interference versus obstruction, and sometimes there'll just be a hodgepodge of clips. So today what I want to go ahead and talk about is interference and obstruction, just a couple ground rules for us to establish. Feel free to come and go as you can. I get that a lot of us are on a schedule or whatever it might be. So if that's you, feel free to come and go as you want to. I was going to mute everybody. I'm not sure if I've done that one, but if you guys could go ahead and mute yourselves just so there's not as much feedback. I think we're all good here so far. And then, after I get done with each clip, I'll take some questions. So if you would, let me get through the entire clip and some of the different segments there, and we'll go ahead and go from there after that. So we'll go ahead and I'll show you those clips, and then after we'll go ahead and take any questions and answers. The clips will be taken from a variety of different levels today. The 3 clips I've got, 2 of them are from Little League. 1 of them is from Major League Baseball. But regardless of whatever clips that we have out in front of us, we're going to apply both the mechanics of Little League Baseball and we'll also go ahead and apply the rules, obviously, from Little League Baseball to those 2. Having rule books always handy if you've got them. If not, I'll go ahead and, like I have today, and typed up a bunch of those here. And then we are on a time limit, as I said. Number 1, to honor your time, but secondly, to go ahead and make sure that we are already make sure that I stay within the time allotted that we projected. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. In each of the clips, I will have basically 3 different questions here for us to go through. And as I mentioned, the theme here is obstruction or interference. And in each of these clips, what you want to be able to do here is determine whether you've got obstruction, interference, or a train wreck, and then kind of figure out how exactly or why exactly you have that, what specifically makes it, whatever it is that you're going to rule. If you are going to have obstruction in each of these clips, remember we got 2 different types, so you want to think, is it type A or type B? And then lastly, some of the mechanics to clean up on the enforcement of both interference and obstruction. So we'll go ahead and take a look at these examples here now for us. Oops, wrong button here. So, all right. Okay, so here is clip number 1, and it comes to us from the 2019 regional. So if you were on that one, you guys get to be in the middle of things here. So it is not a bunt attempt, but a steal attempt. The situation here is 1st and 3rd, if you can see that up here. So we have a 1st and 3rd play on, and that is the one where the shortstop cuts it off and then tries to go ahead and get the runner in a pickle. And as he does, we have a situation that goes ahead and unfolds. Okay. So the question then becomes, do we have obstruction or interference in this situation? Now, how many of you guys think we have obstruction, or how many of you think we have interference? That's the one thing to go ahead and continue to think about here. I would not have interference in this situation. My goal was to kind of make this a little bit more interactive, but I'm struggling with some of the controls back here. But what I have in that situation here, and I'll rewind the clip one more time so that we can go ahead and see it. But what I have in this clip is obstruction in this case. And if that's what you guys have, we'll go ahead and visit the rule book here too with it. So we cut it off. And then as we see here, the catcher clearly moves up the line in this case. And he does not necessarily have to be in that position. The runner does nothing wrong in this situation, right? He's running, he's in the middle of a pickle. And then all of a sudden we have an almost collision, a pseudo collision, whatever you may have. So I've got obstruction on this play on the catcher. Now our rule book's a little bit different. I'll kind of explain what exactly that is. And as I mentioned, I've got obstruction here. If you take a look at the definition, I think the play goes ahead and fits obstruction. The act of a fielder who, while not in possession of the baseball, the catcher was not in possession of the ball, impedes the progress of the runner. And then our note here is that the obstruction shall be called on a defensive player who blocks off a baseline, or home plate while not in possession of the ball. Now, the one thing to highlight is this last segment, and that is 706B Note 2. And this is where our rule is a little bit different than, say, the NCAA, the high school rule book, or even Major League Baseball, because we have no provision in our rule book that talks about whether or not a fielder is protected as he's receiving the throw. So the only thing that we have that's close to protecting a player receiving the throw is 706B Note 2. And that's if the defensive player blocks off the baseline clearly without possession of the ball. That's our verbatim kind of a judgment there. Clearly without possession of the ball. He's not going to be protected if he's receiving the ball or something of that nature. Obstruction then in that case shall be called on that individual. Okay, so we've got that then in play here right now. That's what I've got. Sorry, I was moving through some of the controls here. So again, here's just the replay to kind of talk through it, and I'll talk through the criteria that we had in the rule. Again, the catcher's not in possession of the baseball at all here, okay, as we continue to let it roll. And then he obviously gets in the way of this runner coming through in this rundown. Now, this is something that you'll ultimately run into in a lot of rundowns to think about, and there's no clear path here whatsoever that the runner can have to the plate. So the catcher then here is just in the way, and we just have clear obstruction. Okay. All righty. I will go ahead and pause that one here. Whoops, maybe not. Let me go back here a little bit. Sorry about that one. So the next question then happened to be, as we go through this one, whether or not we have type A or type B obstruction in this play. So remember here, type A obstruction is a play being made on the runner. Type B then is one in which we have no play being made on the runner. And in this case here, if you're thinking this is type A obstruction, you are correct because the play is being made on the runner, and in which case then the ball is dead. Now, the one thing to also note the difference between type A and type B obstruction. In type A, not only then is it when a play is being made on the runner, the ball is dead at that point, and we have to award in type A obstruction, we have to award the runner at least one base beyond his last legally acquired base. Okay, so he has to get at least one beyond when going ahead and ruling type A. Type B obstruction, though, is different. Remember, it's not only no play being made on the runner, that's the delayed dead ball situation is type B. And then also in type B, we do not have to award the runner a base. So only in type A do we have to award a runner at least one base ahead. So this is type A. We would call time in this situation right when that happened. We would go ahead and point with either the left or right hand. That's obstruction. There's no more left arm sticking out. That's more of a softball mechanic, so we can go ahead and not use that one in baseball at least. But all we've got to do is point that's obstruction at the point that it happens. Because it's type A, right when it happens, we call time. We say that's obstruction and begin to make the awards. In this case, I'd say that the runner gets the plate. And then the other thing, too, to also worry about then here is R2, or this is R1, who is rounding second base. What exactly do we do with him? I think we should place him at second base in this case here. He's not even made an attempt to go there. Now, his placement in type A is clearly judgment here on the umpire, too, on our umpires as well. So my awards then here in this situation would be R3 to the plate, and then R1 would be allowed to advance to second base after I called time. All right, let me go ahead and get out of the screen sharing option here. Oops. Maybe, maybe not. Okay. Any questions here from you guys on that one here right now? Anybody have any questions on that clip? Pretty clear, easy one. It's kind of the ones I started with here at this time. So I'll try and get something there. Anybody else before I move on to the next clip here on any questions there? Go ahead, Kelly.
Hi, Stu.
Hey, Kelly, how are you?
I'm good. Hi, everybody. Hey, quick question. So we were talking about advancing R1 to second on the same play. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so with that, that's entirely umpire's judgment in this case. So, I've in the rule book will say that we can advance that runner in our own judgment had there been no obstruction. So if we judge that, if there had been no obstruction, R1 would have been able to take to second base, then we could place him there as well. If we wanted to rule that, had there been no obstruction and the ball got to the backstop and we wanted to put him at third base, I think that's a tougher sell. But you could also place the runner at third base as well, totally in your judgment. Or if that obstruction happened in a time where you didn't think R1 was committed to second base or anything like that, you could put R1 back at first base too. So it's just kind of your judgment there on that one. Thank you. Anything else on that clip number 1?
Hey, Stu, this is Tony. Not on that clip specifically. Jim Muir said he's trying to get on the Zoom meeting, but it's saying waiting.
Yep,
So
I just admitted everybody. Thank you.
Okay, you got it.
I'm find a way to get rid of that waiting list in that waiting room. So sorry to those of you guys that were in the waiting room. My screen was being shared and I couldn't figure out how to get those people in. So. All right, we'll move on to clip number 2. Clip number 1 was kind of just out there, like I said, as an easy one for us to take a look at and allow us to go through the different obstruction and interference. So clips number 2 and 3 are a little bit more challenging here in this case, and some of us have probably gone ahead and seen a couple of these. So I'll get back to sharing my screen here. Should be good to go there, and we should be back and ready to roll here. So. All right, I'll go ahead and go through the next clip here for us, and let me get that one lined up. Again, here as this one's going through, we want to figure out if we've got obstruction, interference, or a train wreck. Now, I'll kind of play this one out, and you'll see this one's a little bit tougher here, number 1, and then there'll be a replay to go ahead and show you too. So I'll let it roll here right out of the gate, and then we'll talk a little bit about it here in a second. And here's the replay, and the replay clearly shows that we have some type of collision, some type of, of interference or obstruction here. So the question then just becomes in this situation, do we have interference or do we have obstruction? And it kind of just depends on who exactly you are here at this time. So to kind of answer that question as to whether or not it's interference or obstruction, what we have to figure out as the umpires, who are we going to, quote, protect in this situation? The rule book uses the word entitled. So we have to figure out who exactly, is it the shortstop or is it the second baseman, who is entitled to receive or make a play on this batted ball? So you could say the shortstop, and if you say the shortstop, then you have interference. However, if you say the second baseman, then you go ahead and have obstruction. Yep, you got it. And I think, Kevin, is that you at first base in this game? This is your regional, I believe. So Kevin's on the call with us. I think they actually got together in this one too. Kevin, I may defer to you and ask you what exactly you guys talked about here in just a second. But nonetheless here, that's kind of the if and ands here in those plays. Now, again, if you rule that the shortstop, F6, is entitled, you've got interference on R2, in which case the ball is dead immediately. If you rule then that F4, the second baseman, is entitled to receive and to make a play on this one, then you've got obstruction, and it should say on R2, okay? I'm sorry about that one. Didn't edit that one as much. Or I'm sorry, obstruction on F6. Yeah, that's right. Now, I'll tell you what exactly they called here in just a second. If you're ruling interference, here's what allows you to do that one well. There's kind of a combination in 2 different rules. Obviously, the definition of interference, which is in front of you, basically the offensive player, whether intentionally or not, gets in the way of this play or of a fielder making a play. And again, if we protect the shortstop, then we have interference. Now, the rule that gives us specific guidance comes to us from 709J, and it's a little bit longer there here. In both clips that I'm going to show you, this one and the next one are very similar. Here we have 2 fielders that are basically converging to make a play, and the runner runs into either one or both of them. And there's specific guidelines here in the rules here for this one here too. I think that we get the runner is out when he fails to attempt a fielder who's attempting to field a batted ball. And in this case then here, as you see here, the runner comes in contact with one or more of them when 2 or more fielders are trying to make a play on that one. In this case, then the umpire can determine in his or her judgment which fielder is entitled to the benefit of the rule. And then again, depending on what happens, you either then have obstruction or interference. Again, if you ruled that F6 was entitled to the play, shortstop, then you've got interference, and this is the rule you would invoke. However, if you're protecting or saying that the second baseman, F4, is entitled to making a play on the ball, then you've got obstruction, and this rule kind of lays out both scenarios here in that case. Keep going here on this one, on this clip. I think, Kevin, if can correct me if I'm wrong here, you guys ruled obstruction on this play. And what'll be interesting to see here on this one with regards to their rule on obstruction, I think you get this play right out of the box. So when we look at this replay, this ball is clearly on like the right side of the infield. In which case, then we see, and we'll see this here in just a second, the umpire, it's actually the third base umpire who rules obstruction on this play, basically saying that F4, the second baseman, is entitled to make a play, and then the shortstop just didn't get out of the way, and therefore you got obstruction on him. Now, the next question becomes, what happens after that? Well, let's first think about whether or not this is type A or type B obstruction, okay? Is a play being made on this runner at the time that the obstruction occurs?
No.
The answer is no, right? The second baseman in this pause clip clearly has not yet fielded the baseball. He's also not trying to throw the ball across the diamond yet. So this then is type B obstruction, in which case we have a delayed dead ball. Now, remember, the appropriate mechanic here is no longer the left arm outstretched unless you're working softball. All we do is we point and we say that's obstruction, and we let the play continue on because it is a delayed dead ball in type B. Now, unlike type A, we do not have to give this runner third base if we do not feel that that would have that would have occurred. So let's think about that. Let me clear that up. If we take a look at this play and say there was no obstruction, and you say this would have been an easy put out from F4 to third base on that force out because we have first and second in this situation, then you would not have to award him third base. So in type B obstruction, important to basically point out here is, again, it is in your judgment as to whether or not you're going to award that base or that runner a base beyond or whatever base is beyond, or even if you're going to do that here, in this case, had there been no obstruction. Okay? Now, if you see and let this one kind of unfold, this was in 2018, so we're still using the old mechanic here. Scott Rosenberg's our third base umpire. That's a left arm outstretch. He rules obstruction in this case. However, the crew decided to let the out stand. All right. Now I'm going to go to Kevin. Kevin, I think you guys huddled up on this one. Do you have any remembrance or any memory on what exactly you guys came up with or talked about in your consultation?
I think you hit it, and unfortunately, being at first base, I had nothing on this play. You know, I wasn't watching the runner from second to third. Scott and I couldn't remember who was at second there. Ruled on that one, and we sort of went with it, as I recall.
Yeah.
But I think I summed it up well.
Yeah, good. So there's a lot of people that'll put R2 at third base and basically call it dead once the play kind of ceases. You're okay, and you are correct in doing so. Or you can do exactly as the crew did here. You can rule obstruction. Again, it's type B, so you do not have to allow R2 to advance to third base, in which case then you would call him out on the force. Now, the subsequent questions happen to be, what do you do with these other runners, right? We started at R1 and R2. Well, remember, once the play ceases, the ball is dead, and we call time. We say that was obstruction, but at the same time, in this case, the crew did not feel that he would have beat the throw to third base if there had been no obstruction, so they rule him out, and then we go first and second with the batter runner advancing to first base, and then R1, because he was advanced by the batter runner's advancement, he would go then to second base in this situation. Now, one last thing to kind of think about here, and this goes back to the interference deal, all right? There are some people that, as we've kind of talked about, would rule that this collision was was interference on R2. And then the other thing that we often get question-wise on interference on something like this is, can you award a double play in this situation? Because obviously the ball's hit up the middle, and potentially that interference impacted his ability to maybe catch the ball, step on second base, and throw it over to first base. The answer on interference in this situation is that you cannot get a double play out of this one unless you think the actions of the runner are both willful and deliberate. Okay, so the actions of the runner have to be both willful and deliberate for you to pick up 2 outs instead of 1 if you go ahead and come up with interference on this play. All right, I'll go ahead and open it up for questions here. Any questions from you guys? Go ahead, Mike. Unmute yourself, Mike, or maybe I have to do that.
Yeah, I was trying to. There we go.
Yeah.
So my question is, I get type A, but my question is, what's the definition of a play?
Yeah, so ball runner and fielder is kind of what we've got to think about there in terms of a play. And at the time of obstruction, we didn't have a ball runner and fielder kind of at the same point for there to be an attempted play on that individual. So it wouldn't be type A. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Okay, so the ball was the absent part.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Good question. What else we got? Anything else on that play from you guys? Alrighty. Well, if there's nothing else, then I'll go to the last
Kelly
play.
asked.
Oh, I'm
Kelly's
sorry.
asking a question.
Kelly, go right ahead. I'm sorry.
Hey, Stu. I just thought it was interesting that we had both R1 and R2 there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was the second baseman that fielded the ball. And if you look at the play, the R1 was really nowhere near second base yet. I don't know if he was slow. I don't know if he was holding up. But, common sense almost tells you, okay, you can't judge where a 12-year-old's going to throw a baseball.
Mm-hmm.
But, in reality, thinking, they may have been actually making that play on R2. But because we don't assume or judge on where they should be making the play, we're going to call the obstruction then on that lead runner. And then,
Yep. And then you would let the play, because it's type B, so obviously you'd let the play develop and then kind of see what the 12-year-olds are going to do from there. And again, the key and everything in type B after that is you get to figure out as the umpire and as the crew, like if there had been no obstruction, what would have happened? And then your kind of consensus, I guess, allows you to not only place runners, but figure out the rest of the situation, kind of live in a hypothetical world there. But common sense.
He fielded well, and he came straight up to third.
Say that again.
I think what I heard, Stu, was that whoever was speaking said, and the second baseman came right up and threw to third.
Right.
Right.
Yep. Great point. Yeah, great pickup.
Hey, Stu, this is Pete.
Hey, Pete.
Quick question for you. If the second baseman threw to third and threw 5 feet off the bag, what would your call, or what would you think the crew's call would have been then? Because he would have to go 5 feet out to get it and 5 feet back to make the tag to the base or the step on the base. Could you have awarded it then, or would you have awarded it then, the obstruction and the base?
Yeah, great question, Pete. In that situation, personally, again, because it's type B, we allow the play to unfold. And then with the way the play unfolds, we can figure out what exactly we want to do. If the throw was off the mark and we felt it was going to be close, I'd rule in favor of the offense because the defense is the one that created the infraction. So in that example, if there's a wild throw and it becomes like a foot race between the third baseman who got pulled off the bag and now has to come back to the bag between him and R2, I'd probably be giving awarding R2 third base in that situation. Great question.
Thank you.
Anything else on that one?
For the next one.
All righty. I'll go ahead and move on then to the next one here. And the next one is very similar, like we have already kind of seen in this play, in our last play. So let me go ahead and this one all settled away. Let me make sure this is the right clip. Sorry about that. Oh, yep. So here is the play for us to go ahead and consider for Major League Baseball here. Chopper then on the left side of the infield, and then boom, third baseman and R2 collide. Now, same situation, first and second, as we kind of talked about. And again, here's that replay of that clip. I think very clearly we've got to have something, interference, obstruction, or just a train wreck. Now, same situation, right? We've got to determine, number one, which fielder are we thinking is going to be entitled to make a play on this ball?
That's shortstop, by the way.
Yeah.
That's shortstop.
Yeah, completely up to you. And in terms of how exactly you're going to rule that one. I will say this, okay? And if you kind of watch the play unfold, and this is where timing's a big deal, take a look at the play that the shortstop has to make on this one. Charging in hard, and it's got to be a bare hand delivery. And then as we kind of know in baseball, the third baseman is told he's got all he can get to the left. Now, we don't know how much ground he'd have been able to cover if he'd have been able to receive this one, if there was no collision here. And because of that collision, and because it's like I don't know, kind of very similar to Pete's question here, we have to go ahead and in some way kind of figure out how to penalize the offense because they basically took the information out of the play. So I would be more inclined to rule interference on this play which is exactly what the umpire crew actually does. Because again, the shortstop's got to make a top 10 play on this one, right? So we would rule interference on that one here too. And you can kind of see the third baseman clapping because they got it right away. But again, same combination of both those two rules. All right, offensive player who creates an act that interferes with, obstruction, impedes, or hinders the defensive player trying to make a play. In this case, it was the third baseman. And then here's that rule that we've already read through, 709J, that basically allows us to call them out. Again, if the runner comes in, if two or more fielders attempt to field a batted ball, in this case, it was the shortstop and the third baseman, runner comes into contact with one or more of them, we get to determine which fielder we're going to protect. And this time, the umpires decided to protect the fielder who was in collision, and therefore they ruled interference on this play. Okay. Before I get to questions here, I'll let the last bit of that clip kind of unfold just so you can see the mechanic here. We're going to point at this one. That's interference. That's interference. The ball is dead in that situation, and then we would advance the runner up to first and second base here. So the batter runner would go to first base, R1 would go to second base, and then R2 would be out. So he'd be out of the equation. Now, the other question, again, that I raise is, can you get a double play out of this? Same answer as before. The answer is no, unless you rule the actions by R2 were both willful and deliberate. Okay, so they have to be willful and deliberate in this instance for us to be able to get a double play and 2 outs on this situation. Again, I'll kind of let the replay show us here. You can see the umpires here getting together and pointing that was interference and that he should be called out. And then there's the base awards there. You'll see here the second base umpire is in the middle of the infield. Does a great job at right away pointing that's interference, that's interference, that's interference. Then we go ahead and call time and award things as necessary. Call the runner out and then move everybody up a base. What questions have we on that individual clip? Any questions? No?
Hey, Stu, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir, Noah.
So the third base, so we clearly ruled that the third baseman there was entitled to make a play on that ball.
Yes.
But it was the shortstop, F6, in that play that clearly came in, charged it, tried to barehand it, and then, we didn't get to see where he was going with it because, he didn't get it.
Right.
So how did we rule exactly there that the third baseman, F5, was entitled to make a play on that ball?
Basically what the umpires ruled in this situation was that because of the collision, they didn't have enough information on what exactly or who to give the benefit or if to give the benefit to the offense in that situation. Because basically F5's attempt to try and field that one was robbed by the collision. And therefore that was interference.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you.
And again, I mean, that's complete judgment on your end. Like, you wouldn't have been wrong to rule that as obstruction and award them because you have the option in 709 to pick who exactly are you going to protect. So if you say I'm protecting the shortstop and you rule that way, well, then you have obstruction. But it's all based upon who exactly you protect and then go from there.
No, I totally get that. And I guess I'm just playing devil's advocate, but it just seemed like a little bit of a tough sell there, though, to give say that F5 was clearly entitled to make a play there. I mean, at least just from like the 2 times that I saw, like it looked right away like the shortstop F6 was clearly charging that ball.
Yeah, and you're not wrong to judge that way either. But again, like the back end of the play, the shortstop had to make a pretty tough play in order to go ahead and finish that one. So therefore, that was kind of I guess you could say the long end of the stick in the argument for those umpires in ruling interference and then moving on from there.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. What else on that one?
I think, Stu, looking at it from that particular standpoint, you could say, all right, at Little League, is that third baseman actually going towards the ball, or is he just kind of moving a little bit left?
Yep.
I think that's where the judgment really comes in. Does the Little Leaguer have the ability to really understand that they need to come across? And many of them do, right, especially when you get into the regionals like that. If you're looking at regular season, maybe you're looking at it a little bit differently because of the fact that maybe the third baseman really doesn't understand that he should cut from his shortstop to get that.
Right. Now, that's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point, because either way, then the third baseman would have clearly just been standing in the way, and it would have been the toughness, I guess, of the equation would have been a lot simpler. So yeah, good point, Tony. What else? Anything else on that play? Well, awesome. Well, everyone, I'm sorry, did I cut somebody off? I thought I was scanning everybody, and I didn't know if I cut anybody off. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us and taking some time out of your day to talk a little interference and obstruction. So I appreciate you guys, and we appreciate you guys being on. Try and do this again next week. I'm out of town, I think, on throughout the week, and I got to travel on Friday to a wedding. One of our own Central Region umpires, DJ Rose, is getting married on his wedding here coming up. So I've got that one to be at on Friday. So I'm going to try and figure out what day of the week probably works best and try and do this one again and figure out what topic to do from there. So thanks for taking time out of your day. Hopefully everybody's safe and well. And then we'll look forward to seeing you guys soon. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Stu.
Hey, thanks, Stu.
Thanks. Good to see you.